In the darkness, sweat soaked through her bangs. Alice felt suffocated, gasping for precious air, her body drifting like a small boat in the waves.
Ah. Who are you? How did you get into my room?
This is room 606, miss. You entered my room.
This is my room, 609. You. I'll call the police.
The man got up and dressed, black pants and a white shirt. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a divine glow on him. He turned his face, looking coldly at the woman before him, her hair disheveled, tears streaming down her face, wrapped tightly in a blanket. The bedsheet bore a conspicuous stain.
Miss, this is the room key. Look closely, it's room 606. I don't know how you ended up here, but since it happened, I'll compensate you. He tossed a black card. There's 100,000 on this. That should be enough, right? The password is 134256. I have things to do, so I'll be leaving.
Alice stared at the room key marked 606, shocked, her mind in turmoil. Seeing him about to leave, she grabbed him, the blanket slipping, revealing her body.
You can't leave.
A female attendant's voice came from outside.
Come in. He looked at Alice. Tell her, what room is this?
Miss, this is room 606.
Who are you calling miss? You're the miss.
Ma'am, please calm down. This is room 606. If I'm not mistaken, you should be in room 609.
This is the room my fiancé John booked for our wedding night. He sent me a photo. It looks exactly like this. How could it be wrong?
Room 606 was booked by a lady who specifically asked us to set it up as a wedding room. The room next door was booked by Mr. John. Since both are wedding rooms, the setup is identical. You can check if you don't believe me.
Under the attendant's certain gaze, Alice realized she was right.
The lady in room 606 had an emergency and left yesterday. The room wasn't locked. You entered on your own.
Alice collapsed, realizing it was all her fault. After years of dating, they were finally getting married. John had booked the best room to give Alice a romantic memory. Alice curled up in the blanket, silently crying. The man called James and the attendant had left without her noticing. Her phone rang. It was John.
Hello?
Alice, I'm sorry. I had surgery all night and couldn't be with you. Are you mad?
Why didn't you come? What's more important than our wedding night?
Alice, you've always understood my work. What's wrong this time? I'll make it up to you later.
There won't be a later. There never will be. You don't know how heartbroken I am.
Alice, what's wrong with you today? Don't be stubborn. We need to handle the important things first. Take a cab to the civil affairs office. I'll come straight from the hospital. I don't have time to pick you up. We need to get our marriage certificate. I'll make it up to you when I get back from my trip.
Alice cried silently. All her dreams were shattered. Both she and John were conservative. After what happened, could there still be a future? Alice's voice trembled, her eyes brimming with tears.
Why didn't you come? What's more important than our wedding night?
John, her fiancé, tried to maintain his composure.
Alice, you've always understood my work. What's wrong this time? I'll make it up to you later.
There won't be a later. There never will be. You don't know how heartbroken I am.
Alice, what's wrong with you today? Don't be stubborn. We need to handle the important things first. Take a cab to the civil affairs office. I'll come straight from the hospital. I don't have time to pick you up. We need to get our marriage certificate. I'll make it up to you when I get back from my trip.
Alice cried silently. All her dreams were shattered. Both she and John were conservative. After what happened, could there still be a future? The phone rang again.
Alice, where are you?
John.
She called his name over and over, her voice choked with tears.
Alice, don't cry.
Take me away, John, please.
Alice, don't cry. Tell me where you are, and I'll come get you.
Alice had evaded the servants and bodyguards. After the wedding, they had let their guard down. They probably never imagined she would abandon her role as the Smith family's daughter-in-law and run away.
Alice, look, isn't that the woman from the Smith family?
An assistant pointed at Alice and John, whispering to Emily. Emily's film crew was shooting on location nearby. Seeing the two embracing, Emily felt a surge of joy.
Give me your phone. No, get the DSLR and take clear pictures of them.
Emily looked at the photos with satisfaction and dialed a number.
Michael, I have something good for you. Big news. I want to see these photos published tomorrow.
After hanging up, Emily thought, Alice, let's see if David can still tolerate you. Lonely Smith family daughter-in-law meets with handsome young man.
Incorrigible schemer abandons wealthy husband for affair by the river. Left fiancé for wealth, now regrets and returns to old flame?
Bang! David threw the newspapers to the ground. This woman was too bold. He had been too lenient with her before.
No matter where she is, I want to see her within 2 hours.
David hung up the phone and slammed his fist into the wall, blood immediately trickling down. In the dimly lit villa, Alice sat silently on the bed, devoid of any vitality.
Ma'am, please eat something. You haven't eaten all day. Think of the baby, if not yourself.
The new servant, Mrs. Wang, tried to persuade Alice. The previous servants had been dismissed after Alice's escape. Alice remained silent and motionless.
Sir said, if you don't eat, think about Mr. John.
Alice looked at Mrs. Wang with despair.
I'll eat.
Alice ate the food in large bites, eating until she gagged.
Did she eat?
David sat on the sofa, staring at the newspaper, not turning a page for a long time.
Ma'am started eating after hearing about Mr. John.
Good. As long as she eats. You can go now.
Mrs. Wang left. David threw the newspaper onto the table. John, always John. Alice, do you even know who your man is? Unknowingly, 2 months had passed. Alice began to show obvious signs of pregnancy, starting with dizziness and nausea, eventually vomiting everything she ate. Within days, she had lost a significant amount of weight. Seeing her lying listlessly on the sofa, David frowned but said nothing and left for work.
Mr. Smith, you have a package. I left it in your office.
David saw a cardboard box quietly placed in the corner. Every year on this day, a package would arrive. David had always instructed his secretary to throw it away without looking at it. But today, he didn't do that. Busy with work, he glanced at the package several times during his breaks.
Was she this sick when she was pregnant back then?
Thinking of Alice's pale face, David unknowingly opened the package. Narrator, tone, sad. Alice's voice was choked with tears as she spoke.
Why didn't you come? What's more important than our wedding night?
John, tone. Serious Alice, you've always understood my work. What's wrong this time? I'll make it up to you later.
Alice, tone, shouting there won't be a later. There never will be. You don't know how heartbroken I am.
John, tone. Serious Alice, what's wrong with you today? Don't be stubborn. We need to handle the important things first. Take a cab to the civil affairs office. I'll come straight from the hospital. I don't have time to pick you up. We need to get our marriage certificate. I'll make it up to you when I get back from my trip.
Narrator, tone, sad. Alice cried silently. All her dreams were shattered. Both she and John were conservative. After what happened, could there still be a future? Emily entered the room with a bright smile.
David, good morning. After you left yesterday, I realized I hadn't given you your birthday gift. I couldn't sleep thinking about it, so I came over as soon as I woke up. I hope it's not too early.
Whenever you come, it's always the right time.
You're so kind, David.
Emily opened an exquisite gift box, revealing a Vacheron Constantine men's watch. She took it out and put it on David's wrist.
I bought this for you in Switzerland a few days ago. Do you like it?
I love it.
The cool metal of the watch reminded David of the warm bowl of hand-pulled noodles. When he turned around, he realized Alice had left without him noticing.
Sir, your secretary called. There's a minor issue at the branch office in the U.S. They need to video conference with you.
All right, tell them I'll be in the study shortly.
David turned to Emily, but before he could speak, Emily said,
Go ahead. I'll sit here for a while.
Thank you, Emily. You're always so understanding.
Suddenly, a commotion was heard, and David rushed over to find two people tumbling down the stairs.
Emily?
David, my face is ruined. I'll never be able to act again.
David glared at Alice with eyes full of disgust, hatred, and disdain. Alice lay on the floor, in pain all over, but the pain in her abdomen was worse.
Sir, something's wrong. Mrs. Smith is in distress.
Take her to the hospital.
David carried Emily to the hospital, leaving Alice behind.
I didn't push her.
But David was already gone. Mrs. Wang looked at her with pity.
Mrs. Smith, hang in there. Everything will be all right.
Alice closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face and dripping onto the floor.
Doctor, how is Mrs. Smith?
Her wrist is fractured, and the rest are minor injuries. Where is her husband?
He couldn't come. Please tell me if there's anything important.
The fall was severe, and the baby might not make it.
Doctor, please do everything possible.
I'll do my best, but it's hard to say.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Mrs. Wang left, knowing she had to inform David about the baby.
You have your day too.
Alice turned her head with difficulty and saw an unexpected person.
It's you, Sarah.
The esteemed Mrs. Smith still remembers me, a nobody. What an honor.
Alice remained silent, not wanting to explain. The newspapers had covered the story extensively. No one would believe her, no matter what she said.
How is John?
You still have the nerve to ask about John? Thanks to you, he's not doing well.
What happened to him?
You still ask what happened. Your husband confronted John, and he was severely hurt. He was hospitalized for a month. That's not all. Now everyone knows he was involved with another man's wife. The hospital fired him. I beg you, Alice, since you left him, don't hurt him anymore. If you want to run away, find someone else.
I'm sorry. Sarah, can you do me a favor?
What favor? Tell me, and I'll decide if I want to help you.
Help me end the pregnancy.
In the hospital, Sarah delivered unsettling news to Mrs. Wang.
Coldly, the patient fell badly, suffered severe injuries, and was emotionally distressed. The baby couldn't be saved. There has been a loss.
Terrified, what? Doctor, how could this happen? Please, doctor, isn't there anything you can do?
Serious, the loss has already occurred. There's nothing more I can do. Take good care of the patient. Even after a loss, she needs proper rest to avoid long-term health issues.
Hopeful, what should we do now? I must inform the gentleman.
Mrs. Wang hurried off. Sarah turned to Alice.
Serious, thank you for helping me with this lie.
Sad, no need to thank me. Although I don't know the full story, it seems you're not as I initially thought. But regardless of your reasons, John, I won't give up on him. I'll pursue him with all my effort.
Alice looked at Sarah, recognizing her straightforwardness.
Serious, John and I have no future. I won't see him again. I wish you both the best.
Alice was sent back to the Smith family to recuperate. Soon, David came to see her.
Serious, we need to talk.
Alice looked at him, waiting for him to continue.
Serious, I will divorce you and give you a sum of money, but not now.
Serious, what conditions?
Serious, play the role of Mrs. Smith well. I need the world to believe I'm a good husband.
Serious, when will you divorce me?
Serious, maybe 3 months, maybe 5, until the rumors die down.
Serious, 2 months, no more than 2 months. I'll cooperate with you, but you have to agree to my condition as well.
Amused, you're the first woman to negotiate terms with me. What condition?
Serious, send me abroad in 2 months.
Curious, for what?
Serious, to study.
Serious, deal, Mrs. Smith.
Serious, all right, Mr. Smith.
Alice thought to herself, in 2 months, her condition shouldn't be too noticeable yet. Morning light filtered through the curtains as Alice gently woke David.
Sir, it's morning.
What are you doing in my room?
It's already 8 o'clock. If you don't get up now, you'll be late. The secretary called to say the groundbreaking ceremony for the Hansan Village project starts at 9.
David snapped awake and started looking for his clothes. Alice handed him a prepared shirt and suit.
I'm just playing the role of a good wife.
Before the ceremony began, David whispered to Alice.
Just smile and follow behind me.
There would be reporters there, and David wanted Alice to be present. The host announced David's speech.
Now, let's welcome the representative from the investment side, Mr. David from the Smith family, to give a speech.
As David spoke confidently on stage, Alice watched.
The Smith family is committed to building a harmonious and beautiful new Hansan village, creating an ecotourism resort that integrates tourism, conferences, dining, and entertainment.
Suddenly, a discordant voice rang out from the crowd.
You scoundrel. Get lost.
A ragged man tried to rush the stage, but security stopped him. He had an egg in his hand, ready to throw. Alice rushed in front of David, and the egg hit her face, the yolk dripping down her body. Another egg flew towards her, and she quickly raised her hand to block it, causing it to break in midair. David stood there, stunned, looking at the woman who had shielded him, covered in egg yolk. Security subdued the man, who continued to shout.
David, you scoundrel. You dare demolish my house? I'll fight you to the end.
The rest of the ceremony was awkwardly completed. David sat in the car, fuming, while Alice had cleaned herself up, though there were still traces of egg on her clothes.
I'm sorry, Mr. David. We didn't arrange things properly.
Find out what happened and fix it. If it happens again, you won't be working for the Smith family anymore. Drive to the mall.
At the Chanel boutique, David sat in the VIP area and addressed the staff.
Pick out 3 suitable outfits and shoes for my wife.
The staff, recognizing a big spender, swarmed to assist Alice.
There's no need, David. These clothes can be cleaned and worn again.
Throw them away.
David.
The staff didn't give Alice a chance to refuse and ushered her into the fitting room. Outside the store, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Emily watched with envy.
Alice, should we go in? Let's go.
At the Smith family villa, David gently touched the bruise on Alice's face from the egg.
Does it hurt?
It doesn't hurt anymore.
Seeing her discomfort, David let go.
Don't be foolish and rush in next time. Leave these things to the men.
Okay.
There was a knock at the door. Alice opened it to find Emily.
David, are you okay?
What are you doing here?
I heard about the ceremony and was worried about you. I rushed over without even having dinner. You don't mind me coming uninvited, do you?
Of course not. I'm fine. Since you're here, stay for dinner.
Hearing her concern, David felt a bit guilty. He had indeed been neglecting her lately.
Alice, Emily doesn't eat spicy food. Prepare some mild dishes.
Alice felt a bit resentful but suppressed it and went to the kitchen without a word. Emily was overjoyed. Alice, even if you hold the title of Mrs. Smith in his heart, you're just a servant. After dinner, Emily smiled at Alice.
I didn't know you were such a good cook, Alice. I'll have to come over more often for meals.
Alice ignored her and went to clean up the dishes. David also enjoyed the meal. Watching Alice in an apron, he suddenly felt a sense of home. He wanted to be affectionate, but Alice didn't want to engage with him. After tidying up the kitchen, she went back to her room. Since their agreement, she had been preparing to go abroad. Maybe Alice's coldness irritated David. Outside her room, she heard the sounds of clothes being torn, a woman's moans, and a man's heavy breathing. Alice blushed. They were in the living room. The noises disturbed her. Alice sat at her desk, distracted.
David, what do you take me for?
Outside, David occasionally glanced at Alice's room but saw no reaction. Did she feel nothing at all? He grew angrier. Alice, do you really not care about me at all? Do you want to leave me that badly? The sounds continued almost all night, and Alice spent the night reading. Alice's voice trembled with emotion as she confronted John.
Why didn't you come? What's more important than our wedding night?
Alice, you've always understood my work. What's wrong this time? I'll make it up to you later.
There won't be a later. You don't know how heartbroken I am.
Alice, what's wrong with you today? Don't be stubborn. We need to handle the important things first. Take a cab to the civil affairs office. I'll come straight from the hospital. I don't have time to pick you up. We need to get our marriage certificate. I'll make it up to you when I get back from my trip.
Alice cried silently, her dreams shattered. Both she and John were conservative. After what happened, could there still be a future? Alice's voice choked with tears.
Why didn't you come? What's more important than our wedding night?
John tried to reason with her, his tone steady.
Alice, you've always understood my work. What's wrong this time? I'll make it up to you later.
There won't be a later. There never will be. You don't know how heartbroken I am.
Alice, what's wrong with you today? Don't be stubborn. We need to handle the important things first. Take a cab to the civil affairs office. I'll come straight from the hospital. I don't have time to pick you up. We need to get our marriage certificate. I'll make it up to you when I get back from my trip.
Alice cried silently. All her dreams were shattered. Both she and John were conservative. After what happened, could there still be a future? Alice's voice trembled with tears as she confronted John.
Why didn't you come? What's more important than our wedding night?
Alice, you've always understood my work. What's wrong this time? I'll make it up to you later.
There won't be a later. There never will be. You don't know how heartbroken I am.
Alice, what's wrong with you today? Don't be stubborn. We need to handle the important things first. Take a cab to the civil affairs office. I'll come straight from the hospital. I don't have time to pick you up. We need to get our marriage certificate. I'll make it up to you when I get back from my trip.
Alice cried silently. All her dreams were shattered. Both she and John were conservative. After what happened, could there still be a future? In Country M, Alice's belly had grown significantly. During this time, she had gotten along well with Mrs. Taylor. Mrs. Taylor was a kind-hearted person who took great care of Alice, even buying many baby clothes, which made Alice feel quite embarrassed. She tried to repay her by helping out more around the house.
Oh, Alice, why are you doing that again?
Mrs. Taylor hurried over and took the scissors from Alice's hand.
Let me handle this kind of work.
It's okay, Mrs. Taylor. Trimming the plants isn't tiring, and it makes me happy. It's good for the baby.
You always keep yourself busy. Don't feel bad about the baby clothes. I just love children and can't help but buy things for them. It's not for you to repay me.
I understand, Mrs. Taylor. I've realized over this time that you didn't open this maternity center for the money.
Mrs. Taylor fell silent at these words, making Alice feel a bit awkward.
Did I say something wrong? I'm sorry.
It's nothing.
Mrs. Taylor snapped out of her thoughts and smiled warmly.
You didn't say anything wrong. I just remembered some old memories. Focus on taking care of yourself and the baby. I've also noticed you haven't been in touch with the baby's father.
That's right.
Don't worry, I won't pry. A woman choosing to have a child on her own must have faced enormous difficulties. Rest assured, I'll help you.
Alice was moved to tears. Since her mother passed away, no one had cared for her like this.
Avid's office.
David sat alone in his office, feeling a profound loneliness with no one to confide in. He opened a drawer and saw a brooch, which made him think for a long time before writing a letter.
Mom, how have you been all these years? Where are you? What are you doing? I miss you so much.
He carefully folded the letter, stood up, and went to find his secretary. The secretary was startled to see him.
Mr. David, do you have any instructions?
Send this letter out.
David paused.
And pick out a gift, something women like, to send along with it.
Yes, Mr. David.
And I'm taking some time off. Delegate my work to the deputy. Do not disturb me.
Understood.
In the following months, David visited every place Alice might have gone, but there was no trace of her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. He drank heavily today. The dark villa was covered in dust, but he wouldn't let anyone clean it, fearing her presence would be erased.
David, have you been drinking?
Mrs. Smith asked with concern during a video call. Since David had reconnected with her, their relationship had grown closer.
I'm fine, Mom.
That's good. By the way, I have some good news. A friend of mine just had a baby boy. He looks just like you did when you were a baby.
All newborns look the same.
No, he really looks like you. I remember your baby face clearly, even after 30 years.
Mrs. Smith suddenly grew sad, tears welling up in her eyes.
That was the first and last time I saw you. Your father took you away the day you were born. 30 years have passed in a flash.
David felt sorrow too and tried to comfort her.
Mom, I was wrong to blame you. They told me you abandoned me and took the money.
It's not your fault. I knew they would say that. I tried to come back for you, but they wouldn't let me see you.
Mom, once I finish my work here, I'll come visit you.
Okay, I'll be waiting.
Mrs. Smith said, tears streaming down her face. A baby's cry came through the video.
I have to go now. The baby is crying.
Take care of yourself, Mom. Don't overwork.
After ending the call, David lay on the floor, thinking of Alice. If she hadn't ended the pregnancy, she would have given birth by now. Day after day, there was still no news of Alice. David felt she might never appear again. Every time he walked through a crowd, he thought he saw her, but it was always a mistake.
Mr. David?
The secretary called out louder, seeing David unresponsive.
Mr. David?
Oh, what did you say?
Mr. David, regarding the negotiations with FT Company and Country M, who do you think should go?
Country M.
David turned to the secretary.
I'll go myself. Book a flight for today.
Yes, sir.
The secretary left, sighing. Mr. David must be going to look for Miss Alice. At New York University, David stood on campus, watching the bustling crowd, hoping for a miracle that he might see that woman.
David, we've contacted the school. Miss Alice hasn't returned, and we can't find any information about her.
David walked through the campus, feeling dejected. Suddenly, he saw a woman riding a bicycle who looked a lot like Alice from behind. He ran after her but couldn't catch up.
Alice!
No one responded. After passing several buildings, he finally saw that familiar figure. David approached her excitedly, about to speak, but when the woman turned around, it wasn't Alice. David fell silent.
Hi, are you Chinese?
Yes, are you?
Yeah, I'm studying here. What about you?
I'm looking for someone.
Did you find them?
No, I saw you just now and thought you were her. I was mistaken.
Well, this t-shirt is quite popular this year. It's normal to make a mistake. Why don't I give you my contact information? You can send me a photo of the person you're looking for, and I'll help you find her.
No, thank you.
David turned and walked away.
What a pity. I finally met a handsome guy, but didn't get his contact info.
Pity about what?
Alice, you're back?
Yes, dear Annie, did you miss me?
I missed you so much.
Annie stepped forward and gave Alice a big hug.
Are you staying for good this time?
Yes, I'm back to finish my studies. I just completed the paperwork, but I won't be staying in the dorm.
Oh, not staying in the dorm? I'll be all alone again. Alice, you're so heartless.
Annie and Alice laughed and joked together. David sat in the car, silent.
David, where to next?
To this address.
The secretary looked at the address. It was a house in the suburbs. She didn't know David had acquaintances there. David stood in front of the house, filled with emotion. He knocked on the door, and a voice came from inside.
Coming.
The door opened, and David saw Mrs. Smith. They hadn't seen each other in 30 years, and he didn't know what to say.
David, you're here. Come in. I didn't know you were coming today, so I didn't prepare anything.
No need to prepare anything. We're staying at a hotel.
Why stay at a hotel when there are so many rooms here?
I'm here for work. My colleagues are with me, so it's inconvenient.
Oh, all right. I'll make you something to eat.
No need. I'll be leaving soon. I have to discuss tomorrow's negotiations with my colleagues tonight.
Mrs. Smith rubbed her hands, more nervous than David. A baby's cry came from inside, breaking the awkward silence. Mrs. Smith brought out the baby, a chubby little one with round eyes looking at David.
This is my friend's child. She had something to do today and asked me to look after him. Doesn't he look a bit like you?
He does a little.
David played with the baby, who giggled.
Let me hold him.
Holding the soft little body, David thought of Alice. If she had given birth, would their child be this adorable?
You're not young anymore. When are you getting married?
Let's talk about it later. I have to go now.
Leaving so soon? Can't you stay a bit longer?
No, I'll visit you next time.
Watching the black car drive away, Alice stood at the door, puzzled. She had never seen anyone visit Mrs. Taylor before.
Auntie, did we have guests?
Alice took the baby from Mrs. Taylor, who was actually Mrs. Smith.
Yes, my son came to see me from back home.
Really? I've never heard you mention him.
It's my fault. He was taken away by someone else right after he was born. We haven't seen each other in 30 years. Today was our first meeting.
Auntie, you're blessed. Just enjoy your happiness.
Yes, as long as I can see him, I'm content. Look at me, crying again. How did things go at school today?
Very smoothly. I can start classes in a few days.
That's good. A woman should learn something so she can support herself and her child.
That's what I think too. It's just that I'm troubling you to look after the baby.
It's no trouble at all. I love taking care of children. I always regretted not being able to care for my son after he was taken away, so I started this maternity center.
Auntie, thank you. You're like a mother to me. I'll take good care of you.
Alice, with you saying that, I'm content.
David sat in the car, silent.
David, the negotiations went smoothly. Should I book tickets for our return?
Yes, book them.
David was like a spinning top, constantly busy with work, as if only this could make him forget his loneliness. A year passed in this manner.
Is David back yet?
Robert sat on the sofa, his furrowed brow showing his displeasure.
He's back and on his way here.
You wanted to see me?
If I didn't call for you, would you come on your own?
Every time we meet, it ends badly. Why should I come and upset you?
So you know you upset me? Then hurry up and get married so I can have a grandchild. You're over 30 already.
Here we go again, the same old talk.
If you give me a grandchild, I wouldn't bother seeing you.
Would you accept a child from a different arrangement?
Are you trying to drive me mad? First, it was Alice and she had a tragic event. Then it was Emily and that fell through too. 2 times and still no grandchild. What are you doing?
Robert slammed his hand on the table, showing his anger.
Dad, there's nothing I can do about this. Why don't you find yourself a new wife and have another child?
Get out. Don't let me see you again.
Robert threw a folder at David, who dodged it. That night, as usual, David video called his mother.
David, what's wrong? You don't look well.
Nothing, just Dad pressuring me to get married again.
David, I have to agree with your father on this. You're in your 30s, it's time to settle down and have a child.
Mom, not you too.
It's not nagging. At your age, you should seriously consider marriage.
I know, Mom. Don't worry about it. If you're bored, why not focus on yourself?
What do I have to focus on?
Like finding me a stepfather?
Oh, stop it. How can you talk to your mother like that? I'm fine with just you. Bobby, stop that.
After a while, Mrs. Smith continued.
Look, the baby you held last year can call me Grandma now. Bobby, say hi to your uncle.
A chubby little boy appeared on the screen, so cute you wanted to pinch his cheeks.
Hello, Uncle. My name is Bobby.
Bobby, your last name is Smith? What's your mom's name?
Mom's name is Alice.
David suddenly teared up, turning his head to hide it.
Bobby, are you bothering Grandma again?
A familiar voice came from the video. David quickly looked at the screen. It was Alice. She walked over, and he hurriedly ended the call.
Grandma, it's gone.
Let me see. Oh, it's really off. Maybe the signal dropped.
Is that your son?
Yes, he's over 30 and still not married. It's driving me crazy.
He'll get married when he meets the right person.
I know, but I can't help worrying. Enough about him. Let's talk about you.
There's nothing to talk about.
Even if you don't say it, I can guess. You're not with Bobby's dad anymore, right? You should find someone while you're still young.
Bobby is enough for me. I haven't thought about that yet.
A woman's youth passes in the blink of an eye. Having a child ages you faster. It'll be harder to find someone when you're older.
Auntie, I'm busy with school and taking care of Bobby. I really don't have the energy.
I have energy. Mr. Anderson asked about you the other day. I've known him for years. He's honest and reliable. His ex-wife left him, and he has no kids. He's 32, just the right age for you. Why don't you meet him?
Auntie, I really don't think so. I don't have the heart for it right now.
Just meet him. Even if it doesn't work out, it's good to make a new friend. You're in a foreign country, having a lawyer friend could be useful. Go on, meet him.
All right, I'll meet him.
David hurried to the airport. It was already midnight. He urgently had his secretary book a flight. Direct flights were unavailable, so he had to take a connecting one. After nearly 20 hours of travel, David arrived at his mother's place. It was already 5 p.m. in the U.S. Narrator, tone, sad. Alice's voice trembled as tears streamed down her cheeks.
Why didn't you come? What's more important than our wedding night?
Alice, you've always understood my work. What's wrong this time? I'll make it up to you later.
Alice, tone, shouting there won't be a later. There never will be. You don't know how heartbroken I am.
Alice, what's wrong with you today? Don't be stubborn. We need to handle the important things first. Take a cab to the civil affairs office. I'll come straight from the hospital. I don't have time to pick you up. We need to get our marriage certificate. I'll make it up to you when I get back from my trip.
Narrator, tone, sad. Alice cried silently. All her dreams were shattered. Both she and John were conservative. After what happened, could there still be a future? David was smoking upstairs, feeling restless. Mrs. Smith sighed and walked over.
Put out the cigarette. It's not good for Bobby.
David immediately extinguished the cigarette.
David, women need to be comforted, especially when you've hurt her in the past. Now you need to work 10 times harder to warm her heart.
David remained silent. Mrs. Smith sighed again.
Tonight, you sleep with Bobby. Let Alice sleep with me.
Aren't there plenty of rooms?
Are you stupid? It's a great opportunity to bond with your son. Use it wisely.
That night, David and Bobby stared at each other in bed.
Go away, bad guy.
I'm your dad.
I don't want you. I don't want you. Whoa.
Kid, I don't believe I can't handle you.
Giddy up, horsey go! Bobby cheered, riding on David's back and playfully slapping his behind. Alice opened the door and was stunned by the scene. David's face turned red, then darkened. He scooped Bobby off his back, held him in his arms, and stood up, looking at Alice without a word.
I just came to check. Bobby can be a handful at bedtime. I was worried you couldn't handle him.
Don't worry, I can handle it.
Okay, then you two go to sleep. Alice backed out and closed the door.
Daddy, horsey ride.
All right, son. David cheerfully got back on all fours, transforming into a horse.
Listening to the laughter from inside the room, Alice's heart couldn't calm down. Maybe children really did need their fathers. In the morning, Alice went to check on David and Bobby. She found David curled up at the edge of the bed, while Bobby sprawled out, taking up most of the space, his chubby feet kicking David's face. Alice couldn't help but laugh. David woke up at the sound of her laughter, felt Bobby's chubby feet, and, with a darkened face, gently moved them back under the blanket.
You're awake?
Yeah, David replied, getting up and quietly putting on his clothes. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I didn't take care of you when you were expecting, and I wasn't there when you needed me most. I don't ask for your forgiveness, just for a chance to take care of you and the child.
Seeing the tenderness in his eyes, Alice felt her heart warm. The morning sunlight shone on Alice's face, her fair skin, misty eyes, and rosy lips. David couldn't help but kiss her. Alice tried to resist but was held tightly, gradually melting into his tenderness. Suddenly, David felt a sharp pain in his leg. Looking down, he saw Bobby hitting his leg with a toy hammer.
Bad guy. Don't bite Mommy.
David picked Bobby up, looking at him seriously, unsure how to explain. Alice chuckled, pulling Bobby into her arms.
Bobby, Mommy's mouth hurts. When Daddy kisses it, it won't hurt anymore, just like when you get hurt, Mommy always kisses it better.
Oh. Bobby looked at Alice's mouth, somewhat understanding.
Smack! Bobby kissed Alice's lips. Mommy, no more pain! Alice hugged him tightly, laughing. David felt warmth in his heart seeing such a tender scene. He wanted to open his arms and embrace both of them. At the breakfast table, Mrs. Smith watched David and Alice exchange glances, feeling secretly pleased. Her smile grew wider.
Alice, have some food. David, eat up.
Bobby looked resentfully at his grandmother giving them food. He threw down his spoon and shouted at Alice.
Bobby's heart hurts, Mommy kiss.
Alice laughed, and David picked him up, kissing his cheek with a smile.
Daddy's kiss will make it better.
Bobby happily hugged David's face and gave him a big kiss. Mrs. Smith watched them, secretly wiping away a tear.